Well, sure, I'm happy to discuss it. And my response is yes, climate change is a concern. There is no doubt that CO2 is a greenhouse gas. I will grant you all of that. But climate change is a concern. It is not our only concern. We have to balance our action on climate change with all of these other issues in our society, including the danger to our economy if we move too rapidly, the effects on the poor and the middle class if we push these policies too fast. And we're already seeing that, particularly in California, where electricity rates have gone up at rate 3 times that of the rest of the U.S. since Arnold Schwarzenegger began mandating renewables back in 2008. We can see what these policies, where they go. And all we need to do is look at California and Germany for what not to do. And yet these climate NGOs and these climate activists, and I would say even catastrophists, are promoting policies that would be absolutely ruinous to our economy and to the poor and the middle class. And I'm opposed to that.
Yeah, one thing too, I don't know if this was on your radar, Robert, but one of the last things I sort of did when I was still like in my day job included working on this kind of stuff is I pointed out that it was the same weekend that William Nordhaus wins the Nobel Prize for his work on the economics of climate change. And the UN put out its document, a special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and there was, like the New York Times, for example, covered both events in the same story.
Right.
So a normal person could be entirely forgiven for thinking William Nordhaus's Nobel Prize winning work on climate change economics supported the stated goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius limit to warming, when in fact, no, his models showed that was such a draconian overkill goal. It would be better for humanity if the governments of the world did nothing rather than trying to limit total warming to 1.5 C. So just to underscore the chasm between like what the published peer-reviewed literature was saying and what was being reported in the media. So to me, that's people say, oh, are these scientists lying? I say, no. But if you look, it's almost like the telephone game. When you look at the peer-reviewed literature, then to like the chapter that it was in the IPCC's, periodic reports, to then like the overall summary and then the summary for policymakers.
Right.
And then the newspaper headline about that.
Sure.
Like each step, it just got more and more alarmist.
But that's the nature of this whole game, right? And remember, no politician ever gets elected by saying everything's going to be fine. The wolf has to be at the door, right? The barbarians have to be at the gate. There is this civilizational, we're going to die if we don't do what I say, right? So this explains a lot of the climate alarmism. And Roger Pilkey Jr. has done great work on this, pointing out that so much of this alarmist rhetoric is based on this scenario known as RCP 8.5, which says that, we're just going to be burning staggering amounts of coal. And in fact, coal demand is still rising slightly, but it's plateaued. The scenario is completely discredited. And yet, won't say the majority, but many of these research papers and academic studies that are done on climate and climate scenarios rely on this outlier, this RCP 8.5 scenario that does not reflect the reality of where we are globally. So you don't get as much attention if you're an academic, if you say, oh, well, things are, we might just stumble through this and be okay. No, you get headlines, you get press releases, you get interviewed on the television. If you say, well, the wolf is at the door, we're going to die unless we do something. So this extremist rhetoric is part of the business of climatism and renewable energy fetishism. We have to have these extreme scenarios to justify massive amounts of spending under the Inflation Reduction Act or, overriding local community objections or whatever it is.
Right. And it's not just that the incentives are rigged that, if you're more alarmist, you're going to, certainly get on TV more, get invited to more conferences and get more funding. But going the other way, if you say, actually, I'm running the numbers and I think probably things will be, we got to watch out for certain stuff, but, it's manageable and that person gets vilified as a denier or like a sellout to big oil, like with Judith Curry, for example. She used to be more of the, quote, consensus and then started just saying, no, I don't think things are as awful as everyone said. Like she wasn't, like you say, denying that carbon dioxide was a greenhouse gas. I guess that's something too that people might not realize is in these models, it's not like the obvious, like theoretically lab known results of what the translation is. Like, oh, if there's more CO2, the more heat gets retained. It's like feedback loops. And like, oh, if it gets hotter, then maybe more things melt, or maybe this happens, or snow melts, and so now the more sunlight is absorbed rather than reflected back into space. And so it's these second and third order things that had caused feedback loops. And so it's like, oh, well, if there's a positive loop and then a little bit of warming causes more, then that's where catastrophe is projected to happen by the year 2080.
Right.
But that's precisely the thing we're not sure about. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, a lot of this stuff, sometimes people, they're led to believe that, well, no, some guy, in the early 1900s went up on a mountain and figured out that CO2, other things equal, retains heat. And so therefore, if you disagree that we need a carbon tax, you must be a denier. And it's like, no, it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Well, and so, I follow the pro and con arguments. And as I said, my stance is simple. Climate change is a concern. It's not our only concern. We have to balance our action on climate, the mitigation issues, with all of these other needs we have in society. And we have a bunch of them. And in my view, I think it's incontrovertible, regardless of whether you think it's getting hotter, colder, more extreme. If we're facing that prospect of hotter, colder, more extreme weather, more, for longer, then it's foolishness, absolute crazy town foolishness, to make our most important energy network, the electric grid, dependent on weather dependent wind and solar. I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, absolutely crazy. And yet, what are the stated policies of the biggest climate NGOs in America? They're all in 100% renewables. This is the mantra that they keep repeating. So again, I think that this rhetoric, these policies that they're pushing, electrify everything, all renewables, it's a deeply dangerous, and I do mean that is the right word. It is a threat to America's energy security and therefore our national security. And I take it deadly seriously, because the things that are underway now with these natural gas bans will make our society less resilient, and it makes our energy and power systems less affordable and less reliable.
Hey, everybody, this is Bob Murphy. Thanks for listening to this clip from the In5 podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing and share this video with others. We've got new episodes dropping every Friday with more insightful discussions. Stay tuned.